The Lord be with you. All right, so people kind of I didn't want to start out trying to do that. So we're going to get started like we have for so many weeks with Maggie doing reading. Thank you for all your reading, Maggie.
Yeah, I used to do it, though it's incomplete. It just says from the letter to the Colossians, but it should say the epistle is written in St. Paul's either first or second letter to the Colossians, beginning at whatever chapter it is. Maybe you'll recognize it. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. All things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the firstborn, the beginning. He is the beginning and the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile himself to all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. And you who were once estranged and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now reconciled his fleshly body through death, so as to present you a holy and blameless and irreproachable before him, provided that you continue securely established and steadfast in faith, without shifting from the hope promised you by the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven. So he's urging them to continue securely established. Maybe a second Colossians. Mm-hmm. Be securely established and steadfast.
Well, that's from Colossians. And if you remember when one of the sessions we talked about what Paul for sure wrote, what Paul may have written, and if he didn't write it, it's very connected to his way of thinking, his community, and then the ones that Paul likely didn't write. And so Colossians is one of those that Paul was either wrote or was written by the community that he was, one of the communities he was with, somebody he was really, really close to. And I really like that reading because it is so big. It's just everything. Jesus, it reminds, reminiscent of John 1, how Jesus is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word was in the the Word was created in the creation. All these things, where Jesus is so big that that's what makes it a Trinity. Jesus is God, and God, the Creator is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. And this is another passage about the bigness of Jesus, and really that Jesus is Christ, and Christ is, not beyond understanding, and also not beyond being understood or not understood. We can understand that, and we also need to come to understand it better and better. And then also thinking about where Paul started with Jesus, on the road to Damascus. So this was the Jesus of, knocking him down and blinding him, because the experience is so intense. And now, later on, and even if he didn't write it, even more so if he didn't write it, in that he's communicating this kind of an idea of Jesus as Christ to his community that he is with. And it's both, it's both. And that's the idea of Jesus is immanent and Jesus is transcendent at the same time, which is one of the things that one of the early church councils figured out, that Jesus is both human and Jesus is divine. And you can really see that in Paul. And I do think, in my own reading over the last few weeks, that this is a progression in Paul's thinking. If you read 1 Thessalonians and then you read Romans or Philippians, which were on the bookends of what we know of his writings, they're much different. and not they're different. They're not much different. They're contiguous, but it shows the development in his way of understanding. Any other thought or any thoughts on what I just said or on what Maggie wrote or read or wrote or read? So how about what was given as possible exercises this week? We had reading Philippians or reading the Acts of Paul and Thecla or watching this movie about Dietrich Bonhoeffer or there's a Dietrich Bonhoeffer essay called After 10 Years. And I should have set that up a little bit better than I did last week. It's actually an essay that Bonhoeffer wrote. It's really a letter to the people that were in the conspiracy that ended up being in the conspiracy to kill Hitler. And it was his brother-in-law. It was people that he knew, people in what was called in the Third Reich, the Abwehr, which was the intelligence unit, like our CIA, the intelligence unit, that became a place where people who knew that Hitler needed to be removed were located. And so that's where the conspiracy to kill Hitler came out of. I know way too much about this, but he was they tried one time, they put a bomb on a plane and it didn't go off. And another time there was a bomb in a briefcase in a bunker, and it destroyed the whole bunker, killed other people, and didn't kill Hitler. And so, Bonhoeffer was actively involved in this conspiracy. And so this letter, this essay was written to the conspirators 10 years after they had started their opposition to Hitler. And so there's just some reflections there. So that was that. I should have said that better last week. But any thoughts on any of the things that you did with any of the possible assignments? Jen, you have the essay.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating, and it was especially fascinating then reading Philippians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Paul had it condensed, but it's the same message, and that is just our inherent goodness and our inherent love of God in community, and how that transcends, if you will, power and just intellectually knowing this or having this kind of doctrine. It's not about that. It's about our living as Jesus asked to, the commission that we heard today in Matthew. Yeah, it was really interesting. I underlined a lot of stuff in here, and then Philippians, there's not enough to underline because it's just so, yeah. It was very interesting.
Yeah, I really like Philippians. There's this passage in Philippians 2 that they think was a hymn at the time of Paul, that talks about, Jesus, even though he was equal to God, decided to take on the life of us on flesh and in humility. And, basically we should live like that. Okay. But just in humility. And I do see the connection there. I mean, one of the end of that essay by Bonhoeffer is that they've learned, what the language he uses is, they've learned to see history from below. So from this perspective of the outsider. And these were prominent Germans, they're in high ranks in the military. And they have, by the circumstance, and being faithful to what they knew they needed to do, given in their setting, they were now seeing history from the underside, or from those who are marginalized and those who are oppressed. I mean, they didn't know it, but every one of those people was executed. Hitler, they knew the war was lost, and they still executed these conspirators. So, were you going to say something?
No, I was just reading along with what you were saying.
Right.
You wanted to quote.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, these things are still out there. I do think if you again, your summer reading program, This is a printout of the Acts of Paul and Thecla, which is not in the Bible. And who knows who wrote it, and who knows if it happened. But nevertheless, it's a story about Paul and how he inspired a young woman named Thecla to become a Jesus follower. And she was, because as you know, in that day, women were seen as property. I don't know how that could ever happen, but women were seen as property. And she is saying, I am a follower of Jesus. I'm not going to do what you tell me to do. And so, like, one of the stories in it is she tells her mother that I'm not going to marry who you want me to marry because I'm already married. I'm married to Jesus. And so Paul gets in trouble for this. She gets in trouble for this. And, it's a really great story about, likely there's some Thecla. If this didn't historically accurately happen, this story came out of stories. And
The first nun.
Story. Right. Yeah. It's a story of a person's response to this invitation and what that means for her, in her community setting. So, and it's actually in the Google folder that we have for this series.
Well, I think that, God sent Jesus as his son. And I don't think Jesus, I think he knew he was the Son of God, but he didn't. I think God wanted him to not know all these things, but to know what was wrong anytime he saw it. Otherwise, I don't think Jesus would have been there. People wouldn't be worshiping Jesus. They wouldn't be worshipers. Because if Jesus just told people what to do, he only tells them to an instance in a situation from God. And that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think he didn't know it was wrong until he saw it was
Yeah, and I think that moves us into the topic for this session. And I've titled it, Who is Lord Caesar, Jesus? And this is one of the things that comes through strong in the N.T. Wright biography of Paul, is that what, as I've said in the prior sessions, what Paul was doing was encouraging the formation of communities that had their identity in Jesus or in Christ and not Caesar. And they still needed to live in the world of Caesar because that's where, bread was baked and soldiers were and commerce was. So they still needed to live in Caesar's world. And then at the same time, how do you live? How do you have a community that realizes the lie of Caesar? And I'm not taking us to like the presidential administration now. The lie of Caesar is the lie that we can get by through life on our own, that we can create a world where we don't need God and we don't need one another. And that's what our culture is very good at, is giving us this message that if we just have enough money and enough energy and enough youth and enough intelligence, that we don't need anybody else and we can just do our own thing. And that's not the exact, that's not, in Paul's time, that wasn't Caesar, it's something different. And at the same time, what Paul was saying to these communities is you're living in this environment, this culture, that the lie of Caesar is that Caesar is Lord, and Caesar, if we just have enough power, if we have enough, if we support the empire, that everything's going to work out well for us. And what Paul was saying is what we actually do is we worship a person who was crucified and showed us that strength is in weakness, and that losing is winning, and that crucifixion and self and other-centeredness is what life is to be like. So that's very practical. That has practical everyday consequences. And then Jesus was also, or Paul was also, like we just heard about in Colossians, he was forming these communities that realized we're part of something very big, something that's reconciling everything to one another, to God. And that's the message of Colossians 1. And then it's also the message of Romans 8, creation groaning, waiting for for humans to be ministers of reconciliation. I mentioned this in the earlier, in one of the earlier sessions, but I actually looked it up. The way of Caesar, the way of Caesar makes a desert and calls it peace. And it's here on the outline. The quote actually is a quote that's in a writing of Tacitus, who's a Roman historian, quoting Calgacus, a chieftain of the Caledonian tribes of modern-day Scotland. And the quote was, "To ravage, to slaughter, to usurp under false titles, they call empire. And where they make a desert, they call it peace." And so that's the way of Caesar. And I say we can, see in our own world the ways of Caesar in the worldwide social, political, economic setting, where those with power exercise that power, and then they say to everybody else, "Well, isn't this great? Don't you have it better now than you had it before?" I mean, that's what Caesar would be saying to Calgacus. Look at all the great things we've done, for you. And Calgacus is like, "You destroyed everything. You destroyed our traditions. You destroyed our way of life, and now we're supposed to, be thankful for your Roman peace." I'll come back to this too. I've said it before. Caesar's reign is scarcity. Jesus's reign is abundance. And I'll say it again in case others weren't here, but that's one of the main messages of the Bible, is that this difference between scarcity and abundance. And that's one of the main themes of the Moses story, is that Pharaoh is all about scarcity. Scarcity, scarcity, scarcity. Make bricks with straw. Make bricks without straw. Scarcity, scarcity. There's never enough. I'm going to enslave you because there's not enough. And then, Moses and God, the wilderness, bread and water just show up, out of nothing. And so God is about abundance. And then I would just say that Jesus's reign, the intent is that how do we live into abundance, live in a mindset of abundance, and then bring abundance to ourselves, to one another, and to the communities that we're in. I've said a lot. Any thoughts? Yeah, Peter.
Well, I was just thinking about, abundance and cooperation. And in order to have a civilization, you have to have cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be the individual.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only concerned about myself and my own wanting to have more and more and more and more wealth. That's anti-civilization, because it's anti-community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the whole basis of civilization is based on cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is basic tenet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is interesting in the light of what Paul is saying, particularly to the Corinthians.
Yeah.
He says, stop squabbling.
Yeah.
Get it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stop squabbling and be generous. Be generous in that instance towards the people, the fellow believers in Jerusalem who were starving. Yeah. Anyone else?
I caught this secondhand, a sermon by an evangelical preacher that friends had been listening to, addressing the 10 Commandments. really getting wound out about the Ten Commandments, but consider in the historical perspective, a group of wandering Bedouins did Abraham and his people and others wandering here and there, and finally coalescing into a society together. They needed a set of hard and fast rules to live by so that they could be a settled society.
Yeah.
Joe, do you have anything to say? I know you're thinking about
I'll just keep on thinking. Just keep on thinking how all of this applies, which I know is what you're thinking too. So I'll be quiet for a second.
Question about abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Is it unnatural for us? Do we naturally come from a place of accepting the abundance? And when I look at that, I look at the birds at a bird feeder chasing each other off. And you look at those beautiful birds chasing each other away. So do we naturally, or is it something we have to work toward? Is this acceptance of the abundance? I don't know that it's natural in us.
What does abundance mean?
Hmm.
I think if you look at Caesar and then you look at, the word abundance versus desert and scarcity, we obviously have a very different idea of abundance. Maybe abundance of spirit.
I think abundance meaning for everyone.
I know.
Not for everyone, not just a few. And that puts to me, it puts a little different definition on the word abundance.
I think abundance also is linked to how we see our clan. I think that from almost the very beginning, when we were teens, that it was always them or us, out of a sense of survival. And so that them wanted what we had. And so there was, if we had abundance, then we had to be very careful about that because somebody wanted to steal it. So I think the sense of abundance, the sense of security, really shaped who we are as human beings, unfortunately. And so the message of Jesus is trying to overthrow that almost innate.
That's what I was talking about. Which is innate.
What we live, so we're always trying to overcome that dark part of our nature.
I'm gonna
Please.
just throw out a different version, maybe. So I was out in San Francisco when they had the big earthquake in '87. And couldn't even get home to my house, so I went home with a coworker. We wound up in an apartment building and it had a generator, an emergency generator. So we propped the door open and that was the only light we had because this hallway light was on. And then of course, after 2 hours, that went out. And we were a little panicked, and we could hear some folks down the hall. So we go down the hall, I'd bring a $5 bill and they're having a party. We knock on the door, they're drinking, they got candles, and I'm like, can we buy a candle? And they, out of abundance, because they knew they had enough. So I'm not saying if you're fearful that it's always going to come, they wouldn't even take our $5. They're like, here's candles, whatever. So I believe there is love inside of us. I believe we get ginned up by media and social media and people who are trying to control us, politicians and Caesar and whatever, because they want us to fight with each other. But my thing is, I think we got the love inside.
That's the dialogue. It's always playing against each other.
Yeah.
In our own.
And even in our bodies.
And we talked about was it Matthew Fox a couple of weeks ago? We talked about original sin, but he would say original blessing.
Mhm.
And so it's for us to somehow counteract this part. I think it's still part of
Oh,
us,
yeah, yeah.
but to counteract that is the image of God is born in us in all different roles, right? So it's tough being a human being.
Yeah.
Being told.
Yeah.
And so those are wonderful examples of when it gets down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Then this wonderful image of God.
Yeah.
Wells up within us.
Yeah.
But for other people.
Yeah.
It's.
No, and I know there's otherizing, and I know communities beyond about 300 people are hard for human beings. That's why we were better off when we were in small cities, small villages. And so then the person over the mountain from you was the other, you know, so, but I just gave that example because these people down the hall,
Yeah.
they weren't in community with us for sure, you know.
It's a good example.
And I'd like to add a little bit to this discussion, just in saying that for Northern European descent people, we have more of that tendency to be Vikings, if you will, to be doing that. I'm gonna get what you have, and so you better defend yourself against me, kind of thing. Whereas, and Joe, you could probably speak to this too, some of the Caribbean cultures and certainly Native American cultures in this country and some of the more ancient ones around the world are much more supportive and cooperative and, having that understanding that everything is a blessing, right? Certainly.
Well, it's true in the Caribbean, where we live anyway. What's yours is to be shared, definitely shared. Which brings to mind the Rastafarians, because there was quite a Rasta population in St. Thomas, and I knew some of them. I worked with someone, and we had a wonderful tree in our backyard called a gadip tree. And every once in a while, I find someone sitting up there. I didn't know who they were. And it was that this is yours, but it's also ours. So I asked this one Rasta guy I was working with, and I said, Tony, tell me a little bit more about why I'm finding these people in my tree and us when we're Rastas. And he says, well, it's yours, but it's mine. Everything you have is also mine. That was this whole concept of sharing. I thought there was something to be learned from that. I know I'm not a Rastafarian. I didn't go that far. They were very nice to me. So
Swelta had her hand up.
I think it's today we're so conditioned for our individuality, and I gotta take care of mine. And I think if you're aware enough of that in yourself, it becomes a choice. And the choice is what is enough. And I think we don't do that. I never have enough. I need one more, whatever I think I need, or I'm told I need. And I think we have to step back. If we identify with Jesus and say, wait, what really do I need? And I don't think we pay attention to that in our culture. All of these things develop and show up differently in different cultures, and ours are so individual and take care of me first and for Jesus.
But yeah, I read I read Philippians, and one of my first thoughts at the beginning of the chapter was, Paul just leaves me dry. And then you read on, it's really pretty beautiful. And I noticed that he always gave credit to those that worked alongside him. So if we're talking about community and lifting each other up, I found that to be beautiful. The other part is when we're talking about abundance, Paul writes in chapter 3, more than that, I also consider everything to be a loss in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. Because of him, I have suffered the loss of all things and consider them as dung, so that I may gain
Christ.
Mhm.
And so to me, that speaks of abundance
Mhm.
from a spiritual point of view,
Mhm.
along with what everyone else said.
Yeah, Joe.
I'm thinking of when we were in Africa, sustainability. It becomes so obvious. We could be as close to lions as I am to you.
Mm.
Everything was peaceful. And the people who had nothing were also peaceful and helping one another.
Mhm.
And there was a deep sense, don't you think,
I do.
Kathleen, of peace within all of us. That's one example. And the other was New York City in 1965, the blackout.
Mhm.
You would not, everybody says we're tough and we do this and that. Boy, when push comes to shove, everybody's out there in the streets, directing traffic, helping elderly people up the stairs in the apartment. Everything was helping one another. So that's obviously innate in us and in the animal community.
Mhm.
We just have to stop messing it up.
It seems,
Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned media, but that need for control or desire for control, there was a period a long, long time ago when I'm going to say it, the Roman Catholics translated the whole Bible into Latin, and nobody really understood what that meant. So they had to rely on what the leaders said that was in there. And a lot of things came out that they found out later that were wrong. And so it's not a new media, although it's accessible, it's more here. And that's, in my mind, why we need to be able to rely on community so we don't have to rely always on people who are trying to control us.
An institution.
Kathleen.
oh, I was just going to say, it seems like during periods of adversity,
Mhm.
these qualities come out
Uh,
of community and of helping and sharing and being together. So what does that tell us about ourselves?
Mhm.
It's maybe it's both.
There's actually,
There's also
oh,
thinking
yeah.
about your heritage as a Scot, and then reading again was comment about making a desert and calling it peace.
And
And I
yet
think
again,
there's-
yeah, with the clearings.
Yeah, I think there's something about what happened then that's really key to this conversation too.
And as I talked about the Celts last week, unless all are well, I cannot be well.
Makes sense.
I haven't read it. I got it in graduate school. I got a lot of books in graduate school. Because I liked it. I worked at a thrift store in West Philadelphia. And there's so many good books came by and they're only a quarter a piece. But I've gotten rid of many of them, but one that I've kept is it's actually called Common Ground. And the book is about how in times of disaster, tribalism goes away. Like the things that Bill mentioned, that goes away because people just see one another as people and, dogs and cats and, life needs to be saved. I'd say it happened a lot during the pandemic. We make some sacrifices for the well-being of others because the need is so urgent. I worked at United Way. In the 10-ish, 12-ish years I've been there, the most generous time were the floods. Because, we raised $1 million in 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I know the United Way here, like for the Cameron Peak Fire and other people just give, they make sacrifices during times of disaster that we then don't make in our everyday. And I, to kind of move us forward in the outline a little bit, and I won't read this again. I put it in this, I had this in the outline last week, but this is back to Oscar Romero and liberation theology of the 50s and 60s and 70s. And the quote just basically says they realized something was really wrong. And these are native peoples. These are not the people of Spanish descent. They realized something's very wrong, that they've been marginalized, that the gospel is about liberation and not a liberation that doesn't include those in power. It's a liberation that helps us see that we all should be involved. We are all brothers and sisters, and we should all create a community that everyone can be involved in, that everybody gets their needs met, that everyone has liberty, that everyone has a sense of, future and opportunity. That's what the people, the native people, realized, and then they started to organize, and then that's when those in power in El Salvador is 13 historic families that held all the power, and the native peoples are saying we need to be involved because we don't have what we need to live, and that's what started the violence and all that. And this, I would love for someone to read this quote by Archbishop Romero, though. Would someone mind reading that? Great.
The word that follows many, liberation, is a reality of the redemption of Christ. Liberation means the redemption of humankind, not only after death, such that they are told to resign ourselves in this life. No liberation means that there is no exploitation in this world of human beings by other human beings. Liberation means redemption that wants to free humankind from so many kinds of slavery. The slavery of illiteracy, the slavery of being hungry because of not having enough to buy food, the slavery of not having a roof over your head, of not having anywhere to live. Slavery, misery, all of this goes together.
And I listen to that, and I know I'm part of enslaving other people, just by the way that I live, the things that I buy, the place where I live, that I am in our country, I am the most fortunate class, white, male, same gender, or different gender attracted, highly educated, came from a stable family, all those things. I have all the advantages, and I don't want to wallow in my advantages, but how do I use my advantages for me personally? How do I use my advantages to bring redemption? The language of that quote, to bring redemption to the places where I can have influence, the community that I'm a part of, the people that I know. And I think that's a question, for all of us. And the answer is different for all of us, but it comes from, I think, a mindset in understanding our, how privileged we are, and what do we do with that privilege. And back to kind of our the theme of abundance. How do we use what we have to bring about abundance for ourselves and for others? Another Celtic concept is called the white martyrdom, because there's the red martyrdom, which you know what that means. I mean, Bonhoeffer was a red martyr, but also there's this concept of the white martyrdom, and that's really just a outlook of how do I use what I'm using, what I have day in and day out. How do I make sacrifices for the sake of others? How do I be generous? How do I see my life as an opportunity for bringing about the well-being of my community, including my neighbors and those that have a similar outlook to mine, those that don't have a similar outlook to mine, the bunnies, the bears, and the bald eagles. So how do I live my life like that?
Well, I was just thinking about that. Yeah, when I was working and I had my own company, I was helping people, not in what I was doing, but the people that worked for me. and provided them with opportunities
Mhm.
that they may not have had.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I could think of one employee who I hired, who was Polish from Chicago, who, crazy as it may seem, in Chicago, he was born and raised in Chicago and couldn't speak English.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I hired him. He still works for the company,
Mhm.
and that's 30 some years now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just opportunity to help somebody.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I've always, felt I don't have a lot of, ability to do a lot of things, but I come from kings and queens, lots of kings and queens for, like 1,200 generations, maybe for more. And so I've, all my family has been wealthy. I'm not wealthy the way they were, but I have all the privileges, being a Kennedy, which was who Queen Mary met him. And so, doing DNA tells you a lot of things you might not want to hear. But the trouble is, only the kings and queens kept account of all their slaves, all their whatever. And so I feel, very much like I will love people love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting we aren't doing this. I think we're doing this every day. I think we do this. And I think, coming back to Paul, I think what Paul was wanting to do was, create these communities where this kind of outlook was the conversation. It was the conversation. And I think that this community is that kind of community. And we can, we do it well and we can do it even better. And I love to listen during the sermon before this, because I hear things in there that affirms what we're doing. And every affirmation is also a challenge. In the baptismal covenant, we're continuing in the Apostles' teaching and fellowship, and the breaking of the bread and in the prayers, persevering and resisting evil, and whenever we fall into sin, repent and return to the Lord, proclaiming by word and example the good news of God in Christ. These are the things that we're doing, and it's so important that we have a community like this, because we have a place where we can come to every week and be reminded of this. And guess what? A lot of people don't. And they don't talk about on Fox News or MSNBC about resisting evil, and when we fall, repenting and returning to the Lord, to the well-being of all people. They don't talk about that. Even on CNN, they don't talk about that. Can you believe it? But to have a place, where this is part of what we do every week is so important. And how do we? And another thing. Just another reminder of this. When we read the Taizé style, I mean, it's in our practices when we sing Taizé style songs, and that phrase of "come and fill our hearts with your peace." We're just singing that over and over and over. And if we live in that, then over time we become that. And it doesn't mean that we figured it all out, but it just means that it's more likely, because we're in worship, because we're breaking the bread and following and teaching of our tradition. Any thoughts?
I've spent my entire life working with helping people. And what I have found most useful is not just that I'm available to help, but I could cross all the social boundaries and the ugliness that's in people's lives, not judge it, and sit with it with them and help in ways that's meaningful to them, not just making me feel good. You know, having done that for 50 years, that's what I would say is what I learned.
Bonhoeffer also talks about the importance of keeping in mind the generations following.
That's right. Yeah.
And here we sit, many of us with the same color hair. And to just assure that what we leave will be better than what we found. Bonhoeffer brings that again and again and again.
Yeah. Well, we have about 15 minutes left, and we might go somewhere with this, we might not go somewhere with this, but I do think in Paul's writings, and we heard that again in the Colossians passage today, is about how do we be a force for reconciliation, for reconciling to, our own who we are, the language of the false self and the true self. That's a way. How do we live out of our true selves more and more? How do we reconcile with one another? And then how do we reconcile to the whole creation? Just like Jesus and Christ in Colossians is reconciling the whole creation, everything to himself, because that is, that's what makes it work for everybody, is that reconciliation. And I think there's two parts of this. One is kind of internal posture towards that being reconcilers. So it's internal attitude. And these are things we can force on ourselves, but over time we can become, more and more people that are available for reconciliation. And then I think there are, some concrete things that we can do as a community. We want to do it in our daily lives, everyday lives, and we also want to do it as a community. And so I put some things on here, and we're not going to have time for a deep exploration of it. But I think we'll just stick with the inner posture for reconciliation. What are some things that we should aspire to be about in ourselves that will lead to more likely towards reconciliation with others? I got started there a little bit with listening first, speaking second, but certainly listening first. Maybe never speaking at all, just listening. Also, generosity, I think, is a core posture towards being reconcilers. Are there other things that people can think of? Inner attitudes.
Well, I think the first thing is you have to tell the truth
Yeah, okay.
to yourself.
Yeah, okay. Tell the truth.
About your prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, and about and our complicity. Yeah. What else? Yeah. Anything else come to mind?
That's the inner posture.
Yeah.
I think maybe also recognizing that everybody has a story that's based on their individual lives, their culture, and so listening to the story intentionally, drawing the story out is part of it too.
Yeah.
Listening to learn, not listening to respond.
Yeah.
I'd say something that what Bill said, and I might not be saying it the same way that you said it, but recognizing we are part of the tribe, and we are going to have a natural affinity to our own people. And that's not bad. I mean, I should have an affinity towards my mother. Hopefully I like my mother. I do like my mother. I'm going to go see her on Wednesday. I should care for my mother, maybe more than any other person in my life, except for Felicia. But at the same time, that has limits to it. I should care for my mother and also others.
And others' mothers.
And others' mothers, right. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of building on what Lori said.
if you have a story, if you have something that you've gone through and you know somebody else is going through it, if you can connect with that person, it's so much more meaningful if you're talking to somebody about something and you know that that person has gone through what you're going through. It really helps to build them up. Plus it makes you feel good too. So kind of
Well, I can just certainly say that. Because what you're saying is because these people, my few, are very much a part of my life. It's really true. And they understand.
Yes.
So I'm listening to, I hope this sort of thing, a series, a group of series from another church. And it's on Deuteronomy.
I'm offended. No.
But the title of the sermon series is Love, Listen and Love. Because one thing we have to work on is that, as you said, that we're not all the same, and we really have to understand and not hold the other person to. We really just need to listen and love them, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a good series. If anybody wants to listen,
it's from another church.
Yes.
We got,
I listen to other preachers besides Alicia.
I know. The way you said it about making a connection with someone that's going through something similar. And when you extrapolate that a little bit, because for me, the meaning of reconciliation is to restore harmony and trust and peace. And I think that connection makes it all that more meaningful. And that the reconciliation, that idea also applies to our community.
Yeah. So the last part, we have 5 minutes, not enough time, but and maybe this is just to sow some seeds for your thinking about life here at St. Paul's. We have resources of time and money. Each of us has, and money's not limited, really. There's no lack of money in the whole world. The only real limited resource is time. And nevertheless, and even so, we have resources of time and money. And we do so much, I think, at St. Paul's in Fort Collins and in Larimer County and in Northern Colorado and, in our world. And there are different ways that we could use our resources of time and money, or more ways that we could use our resources of time and money. It doesn't have to be different ways. We can do the things that we do, and also think in other ways. And I put them on the board here, like there are easy ways that we already do this. There are also some not as easy ways that we already do this. I'd say that one you heard this morning in the service was the Oak Group and giving that $40,000. That was a pretty good decision on the part of the vestry to do that, because we could just keep that for ourselves, and do what we want to do with it. And we didn't. We did something different. That's third year in a row, and that's the second year. The second year in a row the person that represents the organization that got the money said this is a transformational gift for us. Because Ann Zacharias said that same thing about the 40,000 Family Hospitality Network. So that's, I think, in the middle category. And then there would also be some very involved responses that we can make as a community, but would really shift, can make big changes in the area where we live for the well-being of our neighbors. And so I've written a few here, like the easy responses. We support Habitat, we support Isaac, we do Habitat builds, we do things like that already. And there's others that could be done like that. Some of these not as easy responses, like I know that there are church members here that have a difficult time meeting their basic needs. One is housing. It's so expensive to afford housing. And we could make commitments to one another as a community to make sure that people have what they need to make it day in and day out. And that doesn't mean, sometimes people get into situations where they need to make a shift to be able to meet their needs. But, committing to one another as community members. Another one, and I actually introduced this idea to Felicia. She had a couple glasses of wine. So that might have influenced her response. But she was
That was shot to the difficult response.
What if we had a minister of reconciliation? And it could be a paid position, it could be a super volunteer committed position, that what they did every day was just thought about and acted on creative ways that we could be reconciled in our community. The church as a community could more so be reconciled in the community. And it's not that this person would be the reconciler. Right. This person is catalyzing reconciliation. And her immediate response was, we need a better relationship with our neighbors. I don't know who was here for when we were talking about the safe parking. The neighbors didn't like that idea. And, okay.
They didn't want a sign either.
That's right. Yeah, right. Very true. So that was her immediate response. But there's other things, that could be done if a person's thinking that way, every day. So those are a couple ideas for that middle zone. And then an idea on the far zone. Our church has money, and we have money sitting in the bank. And there's actually the NOCO Foundation has started a housing fund that's actually going to end up being a revolving loan fund that will be used to get affordable housing projects going. Because I went through an affordable housing project development toolkit one time, and they said the most difficult money for every affordable housing development is the first $100,000, because that's what builds the architect's plans. That's what gets the whole process going. And what this NOCO Foundation Fund wants to do is to make that money easier in the early stages, easier to get by developers, and to get more affordable housing. Some of it could be new projects, some of it could be redevelopment, that kind of thing. And what they want to do is like endowments that are local endowments. They want to ask those endowments to commit some of their endowment to this fund, knowing it's still going to be their money. It's just like they're loaning the money to the fund.
Is it okay?
Can you explain that loaning idea with something like that?
Well, I can't right now because we're right at time.
We have 30 seconds.
But I can commit the money to the foundation for 10 years to be part of the fund, and then after 10 years, it can be paid back because it's gonna revolve.
At an appreciated rate. It's called, yeah.
That they're still working out the details, but yeah. But that's an idea, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but there's those kinds of ideas that we use our resources for that help our community to thrive. So, go ahead.
I was just going to explain or Isaac can be an easy thing because you can donate money and write a check or go on, not even write a check, just go click a few buttons on your computer. That could be easy. Some of us are involved in more in the trenches And that's really what Isaac is about, is walking alongside the
Yeah.
folks and standing in front of Trinity looking for ice during the Palestinian festival and doing things like that. And driving them to appointments because they're, yeah. So there's a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And Isaac's working on a new initiative, and it's in the beginnings of how the faith communities that are connected with Isaac can connect with the communities. And we were really hoping that they could come talk to us about that on June 21st, except the people that are working on that are not available that day. So we'll do something else on June 21st.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So more, yeah. Be a neighbor, be a friend, be community with everybody and not just sit over here.
And can I say even advocacy also, because I think when we did the presentation on the ballot initiatives, and if everybody here took the information they learned out to everybody they knew, that will make the difference.
Yeah.
If we just are an educated electorate.
I had
Really.
my grandson what a PP wigwam was. Maybe we should just give wigwams to everybody.
If only you did it well. We can talk about that later. So we're at time. And I'd love to have more conversation about this. What this could look like. But also I'd love to have more conversation about Paul. If anybody wants to have more conversation about Paul, email me. I'll be reading this book this summer. It's the first Paul, which Barb Morris mentioned, by Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan. And there's also another great book. It's called Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. Ezra Klein is a New York Times columnist. And it's a great book because it's somewhat about the visioning for abundance, but also how we get in the way of abundance, especially in governance. That's in housing development and different things. But just a very interesting book for me because the theme is abundance. How to create a community that's more abundant for everybody.
Well, I suggest everybody should go to Coco Cafe. Just have lunch with one of the people that can pay.
Yeah.
It's not that you're gonna pay them there, it's going to go. But they have to work.
Right.
Fund their meal.
Yeah.
And so, but sit and talk to them and find out what their story is.
Yeah.
Well,
this has been a great series. Thank you for sticking with it. Lori, thank you for it's just been great, and I really appreciate all the conversation for your participation.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.